So on this page, we talk a lot of Naruto, and I mean a lot of Naruto, but I know a lot of things about a lot of animes, and that's why I've done videos like all the Hashiras explained and ranked. And it hasn't been sitting right in my soul that we ranked and explained all the Hashiras, and yet we haven't touched the 12 moons. So in order to celebrate Demon Slayer Season 2 coming to a close, here we are explaining and ranking the 12 moons. But before we get into talking about any moons, please guys, for me, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell for all of your anime knowledge. But before we get into all that, guys, a little bit of news from me. We got a brand new sponsor, and this is a sponsor that is very close to my heart. Well, I guess not close to my heart, but close to my balls. What could I possibly mean by that is a great question. Our new sponsor is Manscaped. Gentlemen, it's a new year, which means it's time for a new you. And Manscaped wants everybody at peak Jonin level output. But to perform like a Jonin, you gotta have the right ninja tools, baby. And that's where Manscaped.com comes in. Let Manscaped be the 1010 of your life and let them provide you with all the right tools and formulations to reach that peak efficiency. And there's a lot to love about Manscaped.com, but what we're talking about right now is the Perfect Package 4.0. I mean, look what we got in here. We got the Crop Preserver, aka ball deodorant. Let me tell you, it smells like heaven. We got the Crop Reviver, aka ball toner. If your boys are ever feeling down, one spritz and boom, they're right back to action. They even send you a pair of performance boxer briefs. These right here are the softest and stretchiest boxers I've ever touched. But come on, we all know the real reason we're here. It's the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer. This is Manscaped's 4th generation cordless, waterproof, and skin safe razor. Why do I say skin safe? See this right here? That's the advanced skin safe technology, which reduces nicks and cuts in your body's most sensitive places. And it's cordless and waterproof, so trimming in the shower is now on the table. But I know what you're thinking, because it's waterproof and it's cordless, it probably doesn't last long at all. But the Lawnmower 4.0 actually has a super smart charging system with a wireless charging dock and LED lights that show you when it's done charging. And this thing goes 90 minutes on a full charge. Boys, if you can't finish the work you need to do in 90 minutes, you got a forest of death down there. But let's say you're traveling and you don't want anything vibrating in your suitcase. Tap this front button 3 times to enable a safe travel mode. I can't believe I'm saying this, but there's actually more in here, like these disposable shaving mats. These magic mats have everything from comics to crossword puzzles, but my favorite part is Mr. Johnson styles. With the power of the Lawnmower 4, you might be able to pull a couple of these off. So guys, you have a limited time to buy this Perfect Package 4.0, because remember these world's softest boxers I showed you earlier? Well, these and this Shed travel bag are 2 additional gifts added into the Perfect Package 4.0 for those who buy the Perfect Package 4.0 within this limited time. Head over to manscaped.com and use promo code NCHAMMER to get 20% off, free shipping, and 2 free gifts. So what are you waiting for, guys? Show the kunoichi in your life that you care. These videos are actually very nice because it's a very clear place to start, and that would be with lower rank number 6. Except this position's kind of weird because we know more about the former number 6 than, I guess, well, the current number 6. By the way, now feels like a good time to mention that I'm gonna try and do this with the least amount of spoilers as possible. I'll talk about who the demons fight and how that's good for them, but I'm not gonna talk winners or losers or deaths, at least from the manga. If you're not caught up with the anime, nothing I can do for you here. So anyways, former rank number 6, Kyogai, is where we're gonna start. And the reason he's former number 6 is because he was removed from the 12 Kizuki for being too weak, essentially relegated like a soccer team in Europe. But here's the thing, he's not weak at all, it's just his abilities are very specific. Kyogai has 6 drums embedded to his body, and these drums correlate to the room or the building that he's spent a significant amount of time in. He essentially has to haunt a home in order to be able to spin it with his drums. So if he hits the drum on his right shoulder, the room rotates to the right. He hits his left, the left. If he hits the drum on his right leg, the room rotates forward, the drum on his left leg backwards. But here's where it gets kind of crazy. These rotations do not affect Kyogai. For everybody else, the gravitational pull will switch, but he just stays wherever he's standing, like the room isn't moving for him. And if being disoriented in a spinning room wasn't enough for you, his navel drum, when he hits it, launches a 3-clawed attack at his enemies. Invisible claws, mind you. And let's say he's maybe not feeling the room you guys are in. If he slaps the drum on his back, he can teleport himself and selected other people travel to different parts of the building. So this man has gravity manipulation, invisible claws, and teleportation. The only problem is you gotta be in his room or his house. And if he really gets into a pinch, he can use his ability Rapid Drumming, which is exactly what it sounds like. He just starts drumming faster and spinning the room in crazy ways. But it also increases the amount of claws in his naval strike from 3 to 5. And here's the thing, this may not sound useful because as long as you avoid his building or his room, you'll be safe, right? But Muzan lives in a place called the Infinity Castle. It's essentially a different dimension, which is this labyrinth of rooms and walkways and halls and elevators and all of these things. And when Muzan has an important event happen in the demon world, he brings all of the moons there. Kyogai would be unstoppable in there. It's already a labyrinth, and now Kyogai can teleport you to the other side of the labyrinth or turn rooms on you so you get discombobulated. It's a dimensional rift he would be in control of. I don't know how this never crossed Muzan's mind, but it's too late now because he's dead by the great demon sympathizer Tanjiro. But just like a lot of the other demons on this list, Kyogai kind of had a sad backstory. Kyogai was a writer before he was a demon. We don't necessarily know why he became a demon, but after he turned into a demon, he continued to write. After he became a demon, his writing became stale and people started to criticize him for the staleness. In fact, it was his boss who was saying that he was such a poor writer nowadays that irritated Kyogai into murdering his first person. And as Kyogai murdered this person, then ate him, he gained power. But as Kyogai continued to murder and eat humans, he slowly lost the ability to do exactly that. Essentially, Kyogai hit the limit of how many humans he could eat. And Muzan saw this, so Muzan decided to strip him of his ranking as the lower 6th. Essentially, Kyogai in gamers term was hard stuck silver. But because Kyogai no longer had the ability to eat humans, he was looking for humans with rare blood. People like Tsunemi or Kyoshi, people whose blood made demons feel drunk. He thought if he could eat them, he could continue to gorge himself and thus win back the favor of Muzan and rejoin the 12 Kizuki. But he never got the chance to eat Kyoshi because Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke broke into the house and, you know, did what they did. On to the next one. The current lower rank number 6, Kaminue. Kaminue was the person who replaced Gyomai. And after the death of Rui, lower rank number 5, all of the lower moons were summoned to the Infinity Castle, where Muzan stood before them and asked why they were all so weak. I mean, think about it from his perspective. He is 2,500 years old. Kizuki are very rarely killed, and he lost former number 6 and number 5 in like a month. So this kind of flings Muzan into a rage, and he kills lower rank number 6, lower rank number 4, lower rank number 3, and lower rank number 2. That is in order: Kaminue, Mukugo, Wukuraba, and Rokuro. We're not going to be covering any of them because there was literally nothing to talk on. We know their ranks and their faces. That's it. The next person we do know something about, though, is lower rank number 5. Rui. Rui had probably the least tragic backstory out of all of the demons for me. Rui was born into a rich family, but he was a very frail human. Like, very frail. Like, walking and breathing were very difficult for him. Think the guy from SpongeBob with the paper skin and the glass bones, essentially. Even though he had to spend the majority of his life trapped inside of his room in his bed, his parents, who were rich, by the way, loved him a lot. So Rui had love in his life. But one day, Muzan stopped by and was like, hey, I can cure you of all of this. All you gotta do is become a demon. And believe it or not, this cures Rui completely. And he still kind of looks like a human, so his parents are stoked that he can walk and breathe and do all the things a human can do. Only problem is he's got a hankering for human. So he kills a guy in their family home and makes a huge bloody scene out of it. No body, no crime, Rui. Get it together. But anyways, his parents find this huge bloody mess and decide, well, we probably can't have him running around anymore. So his mother and his father decide they have to kill him in his sleep. His father then sneaks up on Rui with a knife and tries to kill him in his sleep. But here's the thing, his father's also planning on killing himself after he's done killing Rui for the crime of killing his son. Good guy. That being said, though, it wouldn't have worked anyways, but Rui wakes up and kills both him and his mother, who is sitting outside sobbing about the whole situation. Rui says this is self-defense, and in his denial decides that his real parents would never try to murder him, and therefore they must have been fake. However, as Rui stood over his dying mother, he heard her last words, which were an apology to him for giving him such a frail body. And it's at that point that he remembers that his father told him as he was about to stab Rui that they would also be taking their lives in order to pay back for what they were doing. This throws Rui into an emotional turmoil and makes him even further confused about what's going on in his life. But Muzan essentially gaslights him and goes, no, you were right with your first gut reaction there. They definitely weren't your family. You can just go find a new family. And boy, does he do that. Rui then spends his demon life consuming humans and becoming stronger till he becomes lower rank number 5, all the while seeking permission from Muzan in order to build his own family. He then finds soul demons and recruits them into his family by saving them from demon slayers or other monsters, and gives them a little bit of his blood in order to strengthen them. But here's the thing. These people are a defense mechanism. They're supposed to be his real family. So if anybody tries to escape this real family, it breaks the illusion of love that he's built around him. So when somebody he created to be his older sister tried to escape, he ruthlessly beat her, strung her up with his webs, and left her out there to die from the sun. But since we're talking about his strength, let's talk about his abilities. It's stated that even though Rui is lower rank number 5, he possesses as much skill as lower rank number 1 or 2. Outside of this, he has the same ability as Muzan, demonic blood, that allows him to give his blood to other demons in order to strengthen them. And it doesn't stop at just strengthening. No, if you get Rui's blood, he can manipulate your cells. He can change your appearance. He can kill you like that. The only problem is when he shares that blood and that power with other demons, he himself gets weaker. This is why I say he could have been as strong as lower rank 1 or 2, but the power that he distributed amongst his family made him a lower rank 5 levels of strength. And what's even worse than that is if his family members die, he doesn't get that power back. So it's widely theorized that he could have given Giyu a good fight if he hadn't distributed his power amongst other demons. But as he stood after creating the family, he stood no chance. His strength came from his blood demon arc, thread manipulation. Essentially, Rui is able to make thin threads from his fingers that he can manipulate in any way he needs. And these blades are almost indiscernible and as sharp and as powerful as Nichiren swords. And if this isn't sharp or powerful enough, he can actually make the threads stronger by pumping his blood into them, which makes them red. He can use these threads to create traps, or offensively or defensively. He can build a basket around you with threads and have it slowly compress down onto you until it turns you into mincemeat. He was a very daunting foe whose need for love and affection is actually the reason he died. But you know who didn't want love and affection? Former lower rank number 2, Hyro. Hyro is a light novel character from Rengoku's story. Essentially, people really liked Rengoku in both the anime and the manga, so there's a spin-off light series novel called Rengoku Gaiden. And in Rengoku Gaiden, before he's a Hashira, he has to fight Hyro, who is a former lower rank number 2 demon. Hyro is what you would call batshit crazy. Hyro was suicidal, but he was a demon. So the way that he would vent these suicidal feelings was taking the revolver that he was known to always have on him and shoot himself in the head. Obviously, because he was a demon, this wouldn't do anything. Hyro in his human life was a member of the Shinsengumi, a police force in the late 1800s of Japan. During his human life, he mastered the ways of Bushido, aka samurai code, etiquette, sword fighting, all these things. But he was relentlessly picked on for his swordsmanship. When he became a demon, he had a lot of anger, so he killed a lot of humans and ate a lot of humans and gained notoriety very quickly. It's this point that he came across Shinjiro Rengoku, aka Rengoku's father. Now, Shinjiro was a flame Hashira, so he was very powerful. So in their fight, he wins. But Hyro either escapes or throws a smoke bomb and runs away, something like that. We just know that he's defeated by Shinjiro and then he gets away. This makes him even angrier. So he gets up to killing more people and he becomes lower rank number 2. And unfortunately for Rengoku, this is when he bumps into him. Hyro is very powerful and also very interesting. Hyro combined his swordsmanship with his marksmanship because he was the only demon ever who carried a gun. And just that one simple fact made him a very formidable foe because he stood toe to toe with Mitsuri, the low Hashira, and Rengoku, the flame Hashira, when they were both Kinoue, the rank under Hashira. He was able to do this because of his blood demon arc, Umbra Kinesis. Essentially, Hyro was able to create and manipulate shadows, a lot like a member from the Nara clan, except there's a bit more to it. These shadows had a suction effect. So A, they would stop all physical impact or damage coming in, and B, they would make it very hard to pull back after you hit that shadow. But it doesn't even stop there. The shadows create a dimensional pocket for Hyro, where he can store anything he needs. And guess what he keeps in there? Just so many guns. But he can also create his shadows into things, like a wolf to pounce at people. But that wasn't the scariest thing. The scariest thing was the guns, because it's not just 6 shooters. He pulls things out like rotary miniguns, single shot rifles, shotguns, Molotovs, all of this. And this actually results in Rengoku getting shot multiple times. And if none of that works, he just covers himself in shadows, becomes a werewolf, and is basically untouchable. The light novels are wild, man. But since we're talking the light novels, our former rank #1 character is also from the light novels. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Rengoku's spin-off story is kind of a spin-off manga. It's not a light novel. Ubume, though, is from Demon Slayer's third light novel, which is why we have no photos of her. Ubume's backstory is kind of wild. It was just she lived with her husband as a human, and then one day Muzan made her a demon. That's it. That being said, her blood demon art is insane. It is literally just genjutsu. Yeah, her blood demon art is literally called illusion manifestation. And these illusions are no joke. Tsunemi, who is probably either the second or third strongest Hashira when he was a Kinoue, the rank under Hashira, could not disseminate whether or not he was in an illusion or not. The only reason Tsunemi didn't die there actually is because Tsunemi's partner Masachika broke out of the illusion and was able to break the mirror that she used to cast her illusions. And that's about all we have on Ubume. Moving on to the current lower rank #1 demon, Enmu. Enmu was the only lower ranked demon to survive the culling at the Infinity Castle after Rui's death. And this was because Enmu had a naturally sadistic nature that Muzan liked. Enmu has a relatively interesting backstory, which is also kind of genjutsu adjacent. As a human, Enmu couldn't tell the difference between dreams and reality. At any given point, he didn't know if he was awake or asleep. This caused a lot of problems for the people in his life because he would do things that you wouldn't do while you were awake because he thought he was asleep. This gave Enmu a somewhat sadistic approach to life. I guess nihilistic is the better word. He didn't care what happened because to him, nothing was real. So he made all his money as a human by being a fake doctor, essentially. He would treat people with hypnotic therapies, but here's the thing, he would lie to them. If he sensed that somebody was about to die, he would tell them that they were cured of their disease. Then they would pay out all their money and they'd be dead in a couple of days, so he wouldn't have to worry about it. But one day, on his way home from his scam, Muzan pounced onto him. And Muzan completely planned on devouring him whole, just using him as a meal. And as Muzan is eating his guts, literally his entire organs, Enmu isn't making a sound. This is because Enmu doesn't feel what's happening. And with his last words, he praises Muzan for doing this painlessly. Muzan is moved by these last words and makes Enmu a demon kind of on a whim. Enmu immediately realizes what he's been turned into and realizes that Muzan made him a demon on a whim and therefore will probably forget about it. So Enmu tries everything in his power to make himself very rememberable. So he kills just a ton of people and eventually becomes lower rank #1. But here's the thing, the Enmu we see in the Mugen Train arc is the strongest possible version of Enmu ever. This is because after all the lower ranks are summoned to the Infinity Castle, when Enmu is the last person standing, he thanks Muzan for all the suffering he puts into the world, and he thanks him for saving him for last, and he thanks him for wanting to kill him personally. A bit weird if you ask me, but hey, it worked. And Muzan likes that he's so sadistic and hates everything and everybody like a little angsty 13-year-old. So he stabs him with a needle with a bunch of his blood in it. This makes Enmu significantly more powerful. Like, he was already lower rank #1, but with the addition of all this blood, he became a lot more powerful than he was. And in order to get more blood from Muzan and therefore more attention and more ranks, he wanted, Muzan that is, wanted Enmu to kill Tanjiro. And this blood helped Enmu with his abilities, most specifically his shape-shifting ability. Enmu, with this increase of Muzan's blood, was able to blend his body with an entire train, and it ratcheted up the strength of his sleep-based blood demon art. I mean, Enmu was able to put 200 people, including a Hashira, completely to sleep. He made 200 people incredibly vulnerable immediately. I mean, it took Inosuke, Zenitsu, Tanjiro, Nezuko, and Rengoku to take this man down. Enmu is also one of the few demons who's able to detach his flesh and control it remotely. We saw this when he detached his hand and used it to crawl around and communicate with other people in the train like it was members of the Addams family. So remember how in his human life, he couldn't distinguish between dreams and reality? Well, that's kind of what made his blood demon art. Because essentially Enmu's whole thing is that he can put you to sleep and then manipulate your dreams. He can make you a perfect dream so that you want to stay asleep, which makes you vulnerable for longer. The problem with Enmu is that he's a support character. If you combined him with literally any other demon, it would be an unstoppable duo. But Enmu is too busy putting people to sleep and then changing their dreams so that they stay that way to go around and kill people, which is why he had to recruit all the children to sneak into people's dreams and cripple them by cutting their consciousness. Like, even by fusing with a train does not give him a whole lot of offensive capabilities outside of the tentacles he was able to produce. And that being said, these tentacles were strong enough to bind Nezuko, who was able to tear through Rui's webs. So they're nothing to scoff at. But he did realize as he was dying that he was nowhere near the upper ranks, which is where we're going next. Upper rank number 6. Well, technically former upper rank number 6. Daki and Gyotaro. This brother-sister combo shares the distinction of upper rank number 6. And this is because usually they share a body. A bit like Sakon and Ukon from Naruto, Gyotaro is usually asleep inside of Daki. But unlike Sakon and Ukon, you have to kill both of them simultaneously for them to both die. Without decapitating both of them at the same time, they will just continue to reattach their heads onto their bodies. But before they were demons, what was going on? Here's the thing for you anime-only watchers here. The anime pulled a lot of punches on Gyotaro and Daki's backstories. So I'm gonna tell you the manga backstory. Gyotaro, just like in the anime, was born into the poorest part of the entertainment district. Gyotaro's mother would beat and even try and kill him because he was born of an attempted miscarriage. This means that Gyotaro's mother found out she was pregnant, tried to abort the child, but Gyotaro just slithered on out. She was attempting to cause this miscarriage because she couldn't afford to feed a baby. But unfortunately, she died before Gyotaro got the chance to because she got syphilis. Gyotaro was a couple years older than Ume, aka Daki, and was berated his entire life for his appearance, hygiene, all of these things. But when Ume was born, Gyotaro became her debt collector, because she was very beautiful and therefore very popular in the entertainment district. And when Ume turned 13, she really started working as a sex worker. I know, I don't like it either, but that was 1800s Japan. I don't make the rules. But Ume also had a bit of a temper, so when a samurai tried to stiff her on a payment, she took out a hairpin and stabbed him in the eye. But samurais, being high-standing members of society, didn't think that it was super dope to get stabbed in the eye by a low-born 13-year-old. So he tied her up and burned her alive, and she almost died. And this is when Gyotaro finds her. Gyotaro cradles her almost dead, charred body and cries to the heavens to return his little sister. I mean, that sister is the only thing he has in the world. Until she was born, he was just the smelly, dirty, ugly kid. But now he had a purpose. And as he's holding his own little Armin, the same samurai comes up and slashes him in the back. As Gyotaro is laying there bleeding out, essentially, he hears the brothel manager from Ume's brothel chatting with the samurai about how he wanted Gyotaro dead. So Gyotaro does what you would naturally do in the situation and murders them both with a sickle. He then carries Ume through the entertainment district begging for help. And it's at this point that Doma, the now upper rank number 2 demon, who was at the time upper rank number 6, finds them, takes pity on them, and makes them both into demons. Please don't simp for Doma. He's a really bad guy. But then again, so are Gyotaro and Daki. We'll cover Daki first because she's the non-true upper 6, meaning that Gyotaro is the true upper 6 and she just kind of shares the distinction. Doesn't mean she's not crazy powerful though. In fact, she has killed and eaten 7 Hashira. And most of her power is derived from her use of her Obisash. And Obisash is the belt that women wear around their kimonos. Except in Daki's case, it's basically like tentacles that shoot out of her back. She can extend these sashes almost infinitely, but here's the thing, the sashes are also sentient. They're also technically her flesh, so she can make them harder or softer as need be. But here's the thing, she's a bit like Rui. When her sashes are spread out all throughout the entertainment district, like they are in the beginning of the arc, they're not as strong. Or I should say, she's not as strong. But she has the ability to pull all of these sashes back to her to regain her full strength, unlike Rui. But here's the thing, if her sashes aren't enough of bending and twisting scariness, she can also control her hair to attack people a lot like Jiraiya. I don't know why she would need both of those things, but apparently she does. But if both of those things aren't enough, she can take an eyeball from Gyotaro, throw it in her forehead, and that allows her to be faster than Zenitsu in Thunderclap and Flash mode, outside of godlike speed. That's the circumstance where he's faster. But he can only do that twice a day. And like I said before, she cannot be decapitated permanently unless you also decapitate Gyotaro simultaneously. But decapitation immunity is pretty much a must if you want to be in one of the upper moons. Well, let's talk about the reason she has decapitation immunity, and that would be Gyotaro. Gyotaro has more than doubled Daki's Hashira count. He has killed and eaten 15. And that is because from the second he became a demon 100 years ago, he just started fighting anybody he could get around. This is mostly due to jealousy, people being better looking or having a better life than him, but regardless, there was 15 less Hashira because of him. I mean, Gyotaro took on Inosuke, Zenitsu, Tengen, Tanjiro, Nezuko, and Muzan himself states if it wasn't for Gyotaro's arrogance, he more than likely would have killed all of them. But his arrogance made him put his guard down, which is why Tanjiro was able to get a little sneak attack on him, which gave Tengen a moment to close back in. And let's not forget the fact that if Nezuko's Blood Demon art didn't destroy all things demon, it would have been the Zenitsu show. Inosuke, Tengen, and Tanjiro all would have been past tense. But remember that eye that he slapped into Daki's forehead? Yeah, that's his core. This not only enhances her strength and speed, but it also gives them a telekinetic connection. It allows him to hear, see, and sense everything that's going on with her. It even allows him to take over her body so they can better coordinate their attacks, which means all of the information relayed to Daki through her Obi sashes is also relayed to Gyotaro. But since we were talking about Gyotaro's poison, let's talk about his poison. This poison is extremely lethal. The second you get hit with it, you die type lethal. In the manga, Tengen has to stop his own heart to stop the poison from spreading so it won't kill him. And this poison is absolutely dripping all over his sickles. Against people without poison resistance, like Tengen, essentially all he needs is one cut on you and you're gone. Well, let's talk about his Blood Demon art. It's very literal because Gyotaro's Blood Demon art allows him to control his own blood. He can push blood out of cuts or from his veins and use that to create massive slashes of blood. But because his blood technically falls into the flesh manipulation category, this blood can slice buildings in half. And because of his insane regenerative abilities, he technically has infinite blood. But since it's also his blood, it's also still poisonous. So he can launch massive sickles of blood at you from a distance that can cut a building in half, and if you don't deflect it, you get poisoned. But if you don't deflect it correctly, it's so powerful it can shatter a Nichiren sword. That's what we learned from Tanjiro. So yeah, it's not really a wonder as to how he killed 15 Hashira. Well, let's get to the current upper rank number 6. That was 10. Time check, I've been filming for 3.5 hours. Kaigaku is the demon who replaces Daki and Gyotaro as upper rank number 6. And he's got a fun little backstory. He's a former demon slayer. In fact, he was Zenitsu Senior. He trained under Jigoro Kuwajima, you know, the old dude with Luffy's scar, and learned thunder breathing. However, he bumped into upper rank number 1, Kokyushibo, and lost, which is like not surprising because nobody wins against Kokyushibo. But he offered to become a demon to save his own life. And like, listen, I'm pretty sure a lot of us would do the same. I know I would. But before we got into the worst idea for a fight he's ever had, what was his life like? Well, he was an orphan and a thief who had to survive on scraps, so not great. And he was actually one of the orphans that Gyome, the stone pillar, took care of at his temple. But one day he was caught stealing temple money, so he was chased out of the temple until he bumped into a demon who he let into the temple in order to save his own life. There's kind of a thing where Kaigaku tries to save his own life a lot going on here. So the demon kills everybody in the temple and Kaigaku gets to live, yay! Because of this interaction, Kaigaku kind of realizes that strength and survivability are the only thing that really matter on Earth. Therefore, if you have to grovel to stay alive, that doesn't matter because you're still alive. Some time passes, he finds Jigoro and he wants to become the next Thunder Hashira. I'm just gonna go on to talking about his abilities because basically everything after that in terms of history is kind of a spoiler. But essentially, as a demon slayer and as a user of total concentration breathing, you have to receive an insane amount of Muzan's blood to become a demon. And because Kaigaku survived this, he was a very powerful demon. I mean, he's a demon who knows thunder breathing and total concentration breathing. Like, he was an okay demon slayer. It's a very scary mixture. Kaigaku kind of got to eating humans very quickly after becoming demon, like almost like he was thinking about it. And that's why he rose to upper rank number 6 so quickly. But on top of being almost unkillable and having the fastest sword technique on Earth, he also got a blood demon art, electrokinesis. Essentially, Kaigaku was able to control and create black lightning from his blood. Think Black Lightning from Naruto. And this lightning, when it hits you, cracks and burns your skin. Imagine you're trying to fight somebody who is one of the fastest people in your universe, and while you're trying to stop their sword, they are also hitting you with lightning. But the lightning itself isn't that deadly, it still breaks you down over time. For example, it almost destroyed Zenitsu's eyeballs. But since we're talking about Zenitsu has a tough time keeping up with him. Zenitsu, the guy who can use godlike speed. And the worst part, Kaigaku can't use Thunder Breathing's first form, Thunderclap and Flash. He can only use the other 5 techniques. If he could have done that, he would have been unstoppable. But speaking of people who give us the heebie-jeebies, next we got upper rank number 5. Gyoko has the most confusing anatomy out of all of the Kizuki, with 2 mouths for his eyes, an eye where his mouth should be, and an eye in his forehead. Gyoko's backstory is a bit weird. He was from a small fishing village, and he was disliked in this village because he did a bunch of weird things like collect fish carcasses out of the water. But speaking of carcasses in the water, his parents decided that they wanted to be ones when their fishing trip went awry and their damaged, drowned body returned to the shore for for Gyoko to find. He didn't find this upsetting. He actually became fascinated with their bodies, and he started incorporating the ideology of his drowned parents' bodies into his artwork because he was an artist. Until one day, a kid from the village came to his house and started bullying him for not having parents. You showed that orphan. And Gyoko did the rational thing and murdered him and stuffed him into a jar. It was at that point that the kid's parents found out and stabbed him with a fishing harpoon, and they just left him there to die. Gyoko then proceeded to lay on the ground dying for 12 hours until Muzan happened to stumble past. Maybe he was looking for fish or something, and turned him into a demon. And once he became a demon, he realized that he had a taste for humans, but specifically children. And because he was an artist and also weird and also a demon capable of flesh manipulation, he would constantly rearrange his body. Just how we got the unholy image that he is now. Just because he looks funny doesn't mean he's not crazy powerful. In fact, Gyoko was able to go toe-to-toe with Moishiro Tokido after he had woken his Demon Slayer mark. Moishiro Tokido, who's probably the 3rd or 4th strongest Hashira of all. But remember when I said he was an artist? That plays into his blood demon art. In fact, it's actually the entirety of his blood demon art. Gyoko makes vases, specifically porcelain vases. Gyoko can just make these vases appear of any size, of any shape, and anywhere. He can then teleport from vase to vase instantly. This makes up for the fact that he literally doesn't have legs. But it also makes him incredibly hard to hit with a sword, because ask Obito, it's very hard to hit somebody who can teleport. But if that wasn't scary enough, he can also shove whatever he wants or whoever he wants into these vases. And let's say you're too big for the vase you're getting stuffed into, don't worry, it'll just compress you into there. Oh, and he can also summon giant fish monsters. Yeah, he can just pull giant fish out of his vases and they'll just swim in the air and kill anything that they can find. And they can't be killed through traditional means. They can only be killed if you destroy the vases on their backs. These fish monsters killed low-level demon slayers, which was because these fish can shoot out 1,000 poison needles from their mouth. But enough about Gyoko. Let's talk about the only person on this list uglier than him, Hantengu, aka upper rank 4. That being said, Hantengu isn't always terrible looking because he is technically multiple people. Hantengu does not have a tragic backstory. He actually has a kind of messed up one. Hantengu was a criminal while he was a human, a heinous criminal at that. Man who killed many people and stole from anybody he could. But all the while he claimed that he was innocent and that it was his hands that were forcing him to do everything. One day he gets caught by the law and he gets thrown in prison awaiting the death penalty. But Muzan takes pity on him, gives him some of his blood, and then Hantengu breaks out of prison. He then kills the cop who caught him, and with the cop's final breath, he says, "It
Doesn't matter if you kill me, one day your past actions and sins will catch up with you."
And that's foreshadowing. Well, let's talk about him as a demon because there is a lot to unpack here. Hantengu has 7 forms. Well, forms isn't necessarily the correct term. Hantengu can make clones of himself. Younger, more powerful clones. And each of these clones has a different appearance, personality, and powers. And he can make 4 at a time. So let's go over Hantengu's personality and abilities and the personality and abilities of all the clones. Hantengu himself is a coward. He shows signs of fear and paranoia. He cries at the most insignificant things. And this is why he uses clones to fight, because even the smallest confrontation sends him into a sobbing fit. Hantengu himself's abilities are basically just stealth and his emotion manipulation. But when I say his stealth is good, I don't just mean like it's okay, he can sneak past a guard in Skyrim. It is insanely powerful how good he is at stealth. He snuck into the bedroom of Moishiro Tokido and Tanjiro. Moishiro is able to sense demons from miles away, and Tanjiro can smell them from miles away. He snuck into that room. This high level of stealth is partially due to the fact that he can change his size, a bit like Nezuko. So if he wants to hide, he can get very small. But let's say you do find him and you stumble upon him being stealthy. This is where emotion manifestation comes into effect. Essentially, Hantengu can create clones that are manifestations of emotions he's felt prior. The first being Sekido. Sekido is the personification of Hantengu's anger. Sekido's ability is lightning generation. Essentially, Sekido can call lightning down from the sky to strike his enemies like Thor. This can cause his enemies to lose consciousness or just be stunned. The next clone is Karaku. Karaku is the personification of Hantengu's relaxation. Karaku's blood demon art is aerokinesis. Essentially, he can use wind breathing. By flapping his flesh maple leaf shaped uchiwas, he can generate massive wind currents. And these just aren't summer breezes. A gust of this wind was able to blow Moishiro out of the battlefield in an instant, leave massive craters in the ground. It even leveled an entire building. Up next is Aizetsu, who is the personification of Hantengu's sorrow. Aizetsu's abilities aren't nearly as cool as the first two's. Essentially, Aizetsu can form his flesh into a yari, a spear, and his blood demon arc allows him to thrust that spear over great distances, which allows him to attack from very far far away. After him, there's Urogi. Urogi is the personification of Hantengu's joy. Urogi can mimic avian physiology, aka he can become a bird, and his blood demon arc is called Sonic Scream. Essentially, Urogi can generate massive sound waves from his mouth that can rupture your eardrums and make you bleed from your nose. And lastly, we have Zohakuten. Zohakuten is the combination of the 4 clones I just said. So he has many personality traits, much more than each of the individual clones, but he leans more towards hatred. Zohakuten can use wood jutsu, essentially. He can manipulate and alter wood from the flora around him by tapping a drum on his back. He mostly uses this to make 5 massive wooden dragon heads that can attack up to 20 meters away from him. Honestly, a bit like Hashirama. But on top of this, he can either use separately or combine the other 4 clones' abilities. So he can combine Aerokinesis with Sonic Screech. And here's the problem. If you behead one of the clones, their head becomes a new clone and their body becomes a new clone. While they are at their strongest when there's only 4 of them, it's kind of like the cut a snake's head off and it grows 2 more. And keep in mind, all of these clones are as strong as an upper rank demon. And Hantengu, who's incredibly good at stealth and can change his size to be tiny, is running around to make sure that you can't find him. And the only way to defeat the clones is to behead Hantengu, who has an incredibly strong neck. Like so strong, a Nichiren sword will break on it. You can see why he'd be ranked 4. But he's actually not the only upper ranked 4 demon we know. No, that's because we also know about Nakime, the current upper ranked number 4 demon. I'm not saying anything happens to Hantengu, but you know, why would there be 2? Nakime is a biwa performer. You know that thing that Zenitsu learned to play really well in the brothels? That's a biwa. In her human life, she was a struggling biwa musician trying to make ends meet. But then she met a man and they got married. But this man was hugely addicted to gambling. So he would take the very little money that she earned being a biwa musician and gamble it away while adding nothing of value to her life. And one night she was supposed to play a relatively big show, but as she was on her way to the show, she realized that her husband had taken her performing dress and gambled it away and lost it. Infuriated, she took a hammer and she murdered her husband. But after she was done murdering her husband, she was like, oh my God, this concert, it's about to happen. So she had to go in a ragged old dress. And the crowd did not like that very much. Also, she had just killed a man, so her hands were a bit shaky. But for some reason, the combination of these 2 things made her play the most beautiful biwa set she had ever played. The crowd screeched for an encore. Everyone loved her. So she did the thing that any rational human being would do, and before she had large audience shows, she would murder someone for good luck. So one day she's got a real big show and she's on the prowl for a murder victim, and guess who she tries to murder? Muzan Kibitsuji. Obviously, she doesn't murder him, and he's like, hey, listen, I respect your grind to kill humans. I've been doing that for a couple thousand years. Do you want to be a demon? She says yes. He says, okay, makes her a demon, and she climbs her way up to be one of his top servants. Yeah, that's right. She's not out there fighting demon slayers. She plays the biwa for Muzan in the upper moons. But her biwa is also what controls the Infinity Castle dimension. Her biwa essentially functions like Yome's drums. By playing it, she's able to summon the upper moons to the Infinity Castle realm. She's also able to separate people in the realm. And she's so good at this that she's actually able to go toe-to-toe with Obanai and Mitsuri to basically a standstill. But that's enough about Nakime. Let's get to a fan favorite. Number 3, Kaza. Kaza, our resident donut maker, has a very interesting backstory. He was born in the slums to a very sickly father. A very sickly father he loved a lot. And in order to pay for his father's medicine, he pickpocketed people around town. He was caught 3 separate times, and the magistrate of the town beat him senseless every time. They even went so far as to tattoo him to make sure everyone knew he was a criminal. They even threatened to cut off his arms if they ever catch him again and branded him the demon child. Foreshadowing. But as Akaza made his way home from the 3rd time he had been caught, he heard from a villager that his father had heard about his arrest and in shame hung himself. His father left Akaza a letter and said,
I want you to live the fullest life that you can. I don't want my illness to be treated with ill-begotten money and bring you down with me.
But the problem was Akaza already had the criminal tattoos and now he had no home to go back to. So he wandered around Edo and he picked fights with anybody he could and he always won. But one day, after defeating 7 adult men simultaneously, he was approached by a man named Kaizo. Now Kaizo owned the local dojo and he was a very nice person. That pissed Akaza off. So Akaza challenged him to a fight, which Kaizo won. Kaizo then takes Akaza in under his wing, mostly to take care of his sickly daughter, because Kaizo's wife, the daughter's mother, had drowned herself from the stress of taking care of the sickly daughter. Not a lot of happy stories surrounding Akaza. And Akaza, who was used to taking care of his sickly father, was rather good at it. And for 2 years, Akaza trained in this dojo and took care of Kyuki, the sickly sickly daughter. And in 2 years, she actually got better, well enough to stand up and do chores. And it's actually at this point that Kaizo offered to give Akaza the dojo and his daughter's hand in marriage, which Akaza says yes to. But here's the thing, 2 years before that, a rival dojo had shown up to Akaza's new dojo and dragged out the daughter and had her sit outside for hours while they made fun of her. When Akaza and Kaizo heard about this, they went to the other dojo and challenged them to a fight. It's at this point that Akaza defeats 9 of them in a battle before the heir to that dojo pulls out a sword and tries to strike Akaza with it, to which he sidesteps, strikes the side of the blade, and breaks it. It's at this point that the rival dojo accepts their defeat and leaves. But when they heard Akaza was getting married to Kyuki, they figured it was time to get even. The rival dojo's heir, the man who had pulled the sword, gathered all the angered disciples and went to go fight Akaza one more time. But once again, they lost. But this victory was short-lived because when Akaza went to his father's grave to tell him about his engagement, he had a feeling something was off. The rival dojo broke into Akaza's dojo and poisoned the water well. And guess who drank from it? Kaizo and Kyuki. They shortly died after. So enraged, Akaza went over to the rival dojo and killed all 67 members with his bare hands. He wasn't just, you know, punching them and they were dying. He pulverized their corpses till they were no longer recognizable as humans. And this caught Muzan's eye. I mean, 67 humans go missing? That's high demon numbers. Muzan was sad to hear that this was a human who had done this and not a demon. But he said, hey, listen, probably recruit this guy anyways. And he asked him if he wanted to be a demon. And Akaza, who no longer had anything to live for, said yes. As a demon, oh boy, he got strong. I mean, here's a guy who doesn't use weapons. He just uses his fists and his feet. We don't know how many Hashira he's murdered. He just says numerous. But his most important ability is his ability to gauge fighting spirit. This is an ability that allows him to gauge how an opponent is going to move in a battle, so he knows exactly where he's going to attack. It also allows him to figure out your weaknesses very quickly. So unless you have access to the transparent world, he's almost unbeatable. He stood toe-to-toe with Tanjiro and Giyu, who were both using their Demon Slayer marks at the time. He has decapitation immunity, and his blood demon art Destructive Death is one of the strongest out there. Destructive Death essentially allows Akaza to shoot shockwaves from his fists and his legs. And these shockwaves can take multiple different shapes and sizes. They can be flowing streams or cannon-like bullets. Without plot armor, you're not beating Akaza in a fight. You could say the same for our next entry on the list, upper rank number 2, Doma, who is said to be leagues stronger than Akaza. Doma is currently most well known for his appearance on the anime where he converts Gyotaro and Daki into demons. At the time, he was upper rank number 6, now he's upper rank number 2. And he got there by murdering so many people. Oh, fun fact I forgot to mention, Akaza does not eat or murder women. Almost forgot to add that. Doma has a very short backstory as a human. Doma was born with rainbow color eyes and white hair. Because of this, everybody thought he was the second coming of Christ, literally. So he was groomed to be a religious leader of the Paradise Faith cult, a position he still holds as a demon. When he was really young, his mother had a mental breakdown because his father kept having, let's say, extramarital liaisons with female cult members. So she stabbed him to death and then poisoned herself and died. And Doma saw all of this, but wasn't scarred by it. He was just kind of pissed that they made a big mess. Then when he turned 20, he met Muzan and he made him a demon. Literally, that's his backstory. It's all we know. But we do know a lot more about his abilities. I mean, this man once let Akaza punch his head off just to be nice to Akaza. Like, Akaza was angry at Doma, so Doma let him punch him because Doma said that he can avoid Akaza's close range fist attacks, and then just regrew his head and everything was fine. All of this can kind of be explained by the fact that Doma is clinically apathetic, meaning he has no emotional range. But no emotions doesn't mean no power, because Akaza is shown to be able to keep up with the fastest Hashira on Earth. In fact, he thought the fastest Hashira on Earth, who he acknowledged as the fastest Hashira on Earth, actually the fastest Hashira he had ever fought, was still too slow. On top of that, he has extrasensory perception, which means that he can perceive things that he's not directly looking at, which makes sneak attacks effectively ineffective on him. And he can absorb any biological matter that he touches. Let's say he grabs me by the shoulders, he could just suck me into his body. But what's his true ability? Everything I'm describing is pretty much Demon 101. Well, that would be cryokinesis. Essentially, Doma can create ice and frost from his flesh and blood. He can spawn this ice or frost anywhere in his vicinity and manipulate it at will. But this isn't just Todoroki level ice. No, let's say you accidentally inhale some of his frost. That frost will enter your lungs and cause your cells to start dying. And he is very proficient with his ice. He's able to make ice clones, ice appendages, ice vines to grab things. And in combination with this cryokinesis, Doma uses Tessenjutsu, which is essentially him wielding an iron fan that he uses to either attack or fan the frost at his enemies. And his Tessenjutsu is said to be greater than Akaza's martial arts skill, but even he doesn't hold the flame. To our last entry on the list, upper rank number 1, Kokyushibu. Oh god, where even to start with Kokyushibu? Film update, 5 hours. Oh, I want to be a YouTuber. It's not easy. Okay, so Kokyushibu was born in the Sengoku era, which is about 500 years before the events of Demon Slayer. And Kokyushibu was a twin when he was born. His brother was Yoriichi, aka the guy you saw in that flashback when Tanjiro starts using Hinokami Kagura against Daki. However, when they were born, twins were a bad omen. So Yoriichi, who had a weird birthmark on his forehead, a lot like Tanjiro, was sent to a temple when he was 10 years old. So Kokyushibu got the parents. Nice. Because Kokyushibu didn't have the weird birthmark, he was trained to be a samurai by his father, but because Yoriichi was being sent to a temple when he was 10, years 0 to 10, he kind of just was pushed into a corner. Everyone thought Yoriichi was deaf because he never talked, but when he turned 7, he told Kokyushibu while he was practicing to be a samurai that he too wanted to be a samurai. Everyone laughed because he was the bad kid, but one of his father's men actually taught Yoriichi a basic stance, and Yoriichi, to everyone's surprise, then continued to land 4 blows on this man in a wooden sword battle. Kokyushibu had never landed 1 blow, so Yoriichi was a natural genius. Kokyushibu was bewildered and asked how Yoriichi landed these blows. Yoriichi said he just saw all of the bones and muscle fragments of the person he was fighting and chose where to go accordingly based off what he saw. It's at this point that Kokyushibu realized that Yoriichi could see humans transparently, but only after taking a deep breath before he took his stance. Yoriichi decided to not train in the way of the samurai, but Kokyushibu continued his training. But here's the thing, their father had heard about how much of a natural genius Yoriichi was, and both Yoriichi and Kokyushibu were fearful that their father would switch who was sent to the temple. So before their father could send Kokyushibu to the temple instead of Yoriichi, Yoriichi actually left for the temple. Coordinated this with the night that his mother died of an illness, because he could see into her body and saw exactly when she was going to die. This act of pity made Kokyushibu hate Yoriichi, and they didn't meet again for 10 years. Kokyushibu became an adult and married a woman and had 2 children. One night, a demon came to his camp and murdered his entire family and everybody with him, leaving Kokyushibu as the only survivor. It's at this point that Yoriichi comes and quickly kills the demon. This made Kokyushibu very jealous of Yoriichi's power once again, so he abandoned his life as a samurai and joined Yoriichi as a demon slayer. Kokyushibu watched as Yoriichi tried to teach other demon slayers his breathing technique, but nobody could get it, but they adapted sun breathing into their own techniques, making the original sword breathing techniques. Kokyushibu also couldn't learn sun breathing, so he adapted it into moon breathing, which was very powerful, but not as powerful as sun breathing, and that pissed Kokyushibu off. But he did awaken a demon slayer mark, much like Yoriichi. And ironically, this is why he became a demon. See, he was afraid that he was going to get prejudice for his mark, just like Yoriichi had his whole life. Tie that together with the fact that he was never going to be able to surpass Yoriichi. When Muzan approached him with a way to get extra power, he said yes. And just like that, he was upper rank number 1. It took him 3 days to fully transform into a demon because of how much blood Muzan had to put into it. But it was a worthwhile investment because his abilities were insane. I mean, think about it. This is a demon with a ridiculous amount of Muzan's blood, a demon slayer mark, can use total concentration breathing, and was literally taught swordsmanship from the creator of sun breathing. Oh, also he's 500 years old and has been fighting Hashiras that entire time, so he's perfectly honed his fighting skills. And he's got 6 eyes. Kokyushibu held his own against Gyomei and Tsunemi, who had both awoken their demon slayer marks simultaneously. That's the first and the second strongest Hashiras on Earth. Oh, and because he is technically a demon slayer with a demon slayer mark, he has access to Transparent World. But not just access, he is always in transparent world, which allows him to see the muscles, blood flow, joints, bone structure of every single person. This allows him to see weaknesses, identify illnesses, predict attacks perfectly. He was even able to see that Moishiro Takedo was one of his descendants. And like all other demons, he can manipulate his flesh, except here's the thing, his sword is made of his flesh, which means if his sword is destroyed, he can instantly make it back, or he can change its shape, or he can add extra swords onto his sword. I mean, this man is so fast, he cut off Akaza's arms before Akaza even noticed what happened. Oh, and also he can regenerate his head if you cut it off. But let's talk about moon breathing. Essentially, Kokyoshiba found a way to combine moon breathing with his blood demon art, which is just called Crescent Moon Blades, where he can create physical crescent moons, sharp as blades, and add them into his swings. So not only do you have to worry about a sword, you now have to worry about several very sharp moon-shaped projectiles that come along with every swing. And here's the thing, these moons aren't predictable. They follow no pattern in terms of size or in terms of placement. So he's very hard to fight against. Not to mention, moon breathing has 15 forms. It takes 5 Hashira level people simultaneously just to hurt him. Very excited to see him animated. I'm also very excited to see this video edited because it is done. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. This was the longest video and the most research I have ever done, but it was also very fun to make. I know it won't do as well as my Naruto videos, but if you're a Demon Slayer fan, I hope you've enjoyed it. And even if you're not a Demon Slayer fan and you're just a fan of hour-long rambling anime videos, well then please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I don't know how I ended up talking more on a day I don't stream than on days I do stream, but here we are.